Hello everybody, and welcome to Theology 101. Today I'm going to talk about the Davidic Covenant. The Davidic Covenant appears in 2 Samuel chapter 7. The context of the passage is that King David is at his palace during a time of peace. Next to his palace was the tabernacle, which was a tent where God's presence was and where Israel would gather to worship. Comparing his palace to the tabernacle, David decides he wants to do something. Now when the king lived in his house and the Lord had given him rest from all his surrounding enemies, the king said to Nathan the prophet, "See now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells in a tent." So David recognizes it is not right that he lives in a better house than God. He decides that he wants to build a temple for God. When David tells the prophet Nathan about his desire, Nathan gives David permission to build this temple. However, that night, God comes to Nathan to relay a message to David and to stop him. Why? Because David disqualified himself from building God's house since he was a man of war and violence. However, God did honor David's intention with a promise or covenant. Now, this covenant God makes with David is an unconditional covenant because God does not place any conditions of obedience to it like he does with the Mosaic covenant. The certainty of this promise rests solely on God's faithfulness and does not depend on David's obedience, as is evidenced in the rest of 2 Samuel. Now, what is in this covenant? First, God promises to make David's name great. "And I have been with you wherever you went, and have cut off all of your enemies from before you. And I will make for you a great name, like the name of the great ones of the earth." The fact that David is considered the greatest king in Israel's history, and that we still know who King David is after all these years, shows us how God has been faithful to this promise. Second, God reaffirms the promise of the land that he made with Abraham. "And I will appoint a place for my people Israel and will plant them, so that they may dwell in their own place and be disturbed no more." This promise of land is important in defining Israel as a nation. Repeating this promise reassures David that Israel will continue to be a nation in the future, just as he first promised to Abraham. Third, God promises that David's son will succeed him as king of Israel, and that this son, namely Solomon, will build the temple. "I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name." Later, we see this promise unfold when Solomon does end up building this temple with the best materials in the world, including the cedars of Lebanon, pure gold, and all types of precious stones. To show you the massive scale of this temple, the building project requires 70,000 carriers, 80,000 stone cutters, and 3,300 foremen to supervise this project. Fourth, God says that a future descendant of David will have an everlasting kingdom. "When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever." This promise is a reference to the Messiah, who will have a kingdom that will last forever. In fact, we see that this Messiah will come physically from David. The word house refers to the idea of a dynasty, which means that God is promising that David's lineage will become a dynasty. This future king, or the Messiah, will be viewed by God as his son. So how does this covenant become fulfilled? Well, we see several prophecies that point to Jesus as the promised son of David from the Davidic covenant. Let's look at the first prophecy. "As for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will tell of the decree. The Lord said to me, 'You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with the rod of iron and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel.'" So we see that this future king is spoken of as a son of God. Notice that God says that this future king will be set on Zion, which is another name for Jerusalem, which is the capital of Israel. And from Jerusalem, this king will have the nations as his heritage, and he will have authority over the ends of the earth. This correlates with what Jesus said when he told his disciples that all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to him when giving his great commission to his disciples. We see another prophecy regarding Jesus as the promised son of David. "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end, on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this." Now we see certain divine attributes attributes given to this future king. He is called Wonderful Counselor. This does not mean he's a nice therapist. The word wonderful is the idea of performing miracles, which is called signs or wonders. The word counselor refers to an idea of an advocate or a lawyer. So this future king will perform miracles and advocate for his people, in other words. He is explicitly called Mighty God and Everlasting Father, which were titles reserved only for God the Father. Finally, he is called the Prince of Peace, meaning that under his reign there will be only peace. We know this prophecy points to Jesus when the angel Gabriel references this prophecy when telling Mary about Jesus. Let's look at a final prophecy about Jesus. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord, and his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide disputes by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins. A shoot is something that comes out of a stump to signify that there is still life in that tree. Even after Israel has been judged and their kingdom destroyed, this prophecy says that a future will come from the line of Jesse, referring to David's father, who will come forth to restore Israel and rule over the world. And we see how this prophecy ultimately points to Jesus when he identifies himself this way at the end of the book of Revelation. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you about these things for the churches. I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright morning star. Notice the phrase root and the descendant of David. Jesus is not only the one who physically comes from David as a shoot that comes out of the stump of Jesse, but also is the root of David, meaning he is the Lord of David. How is Jesus both the root and descendant of David? Because he is the promised son of David from the Davidic Covenant who comes from David, but is ultimately the one who will rule over David and the nations of the world. Thank you to today's sponsor, Awe and Reverence. They offer a free digital worship music app called Maskill. If you want to find out more, I'll leave some links below in the description box. If you missed the last video about the priestly covenant, I'll leave a link for you here. Until next time, see you.